Hello and welcome to today's webinar entitled Digital Outposts, Combat Assault, and Artillery. My name is Lauren Kornegay-Dollar and I'm the Adult Programs Coordinator here at the National Museum of the Pacific War. I'm going to go ahead and introduce my guest in studio, my colleague in the Education Department, Aaron Shuman. Why don't you introduce yourself for just a second?
Sure. So like Lauren said, my name is Aaron. I am the Museum Experience Coordinator here at the National Museum of the Pacific War. I do a lot of things in our Education Department. I have an interesting title that lets them slot me in wherever they want. But my primary focus is our Living History program, and that's why they have me on today to talk about our new digital Living History Outposts. So Living History Outposts kind of came out of the pandemic. When I started this program or started working at this position in the summer of 2021, we were still mostly closed up because of pandemic restrictions, and we weren't able to do our large battle programs that we had done really all the way back to the 90s. And we had to do smaller programs that were a little bit more versatile and a little easier to deal with those restrictions. That's where the Outpost came from. So we, first off, kind of what is one of these outposts? Think of it a little bit like a ranger talk. It's about 15 minutes long. We try to do our best to stick to one particular topic. We're not going to do this broad overview. We're going to stick to something narrow. And it's an opportunity for people to learn a little bit more about something they wouldn't necessarily pick up on walking through the museum otherwise. At the core of these programs is our multisensory interpretive model. Essentially, we realized if you're going through our museum, if you're watching a film or you're reading something, essentially you are always just using sight and sound. You're always using two senses, and it doesn't really give you as much opportunity to engage with the history. And you can see in this photo, we have somebody at one of our hurry up and wait outposts actually holding a mitt. Some of the other items there, these are actual artifacts from the Pacific War. And we're able to let people touch and feel these historic artifacts. It gives them a connection that I like to say they can't really pick up anywhere else in the country. So when we first started Outpost programs in 2021, we had exactly 4 topics. And we thought after a little bit of time that these looked like maybe they would be a useful program to keep around. And we decided to grow those topics. Last year we had 8 topics, and this year we are all the way up to 12 topics. And you can see they cover a lot of different things. It's not just our combat stuff, but we also have everything from what people are doing on the home front to how the Japanese military was living its life. And then we started thinking a little bit about moving these over into the virtual realm sometime about last year. Essentially, we figured Fredericksburg is a little ways from everything. We wanted to give everybody who didn't live here in the Texas Hill Country an opportunity to check out these programs. So to that end, we have prepared for you a sneak peek to our first 2 virtual outpost programs. One is on light artillery. The other is on our combat assault team. And we're going to go ahead and play those for you now. So roll the tape.
Fire in the hole!
Hello and welcome to one of the National Museum of the Pacific War's virtual outpost programs. In today's program, we'll be looking at several pieces of light artillery that helped us win the war in the Pacific. Now, when most of us think of the Pacific War, we don't think that American forces had any shortage of firepower. Especially during later battles of the war, our naval and air superiority ensured that we vastly outmatched the Japanese in firepower. But early in the war, this was not the case, and many American forces had to rely on light, man-portable artillery to win the day. So in today's program, we'll be taking a look at 3 individual pieces of light artillery. Let's take a look at our first piece. This is the M2 Mortar. And before we break down this particular mortar, let's talk about what a mortar is. A mortar is a type of light artillery that fires using indirect fire. What that means is that unlike a rifle that shoots down its barrel at the target, the mortar fires up, over, and falls on top of its target. That makes the mortar exceptionally well suited for the environment of the Pacific. You could fire it into shell holes, craters, over hills, into ravines, and even directly into enemy trenches. This particular mortar fired a 60mm round up to 500 yards towards the enemy. A well-trained crew could get out about 35 rounds a minute out of this mortar. Each of those rounds, when they hit the ground, would explode into a 17-yard circle of flying white-hot pieces of shrapnel. You can imagine the devastation that just 4 mortar crews could wreak on a Japanese position in 5 minutes. They could put hundreds of shells on top of the enemy. One thing that made the M2 mortar exceptionally effective in the Pacific was its light weight. Weighing only 42 pounds, this weapon could be slung over the shoulder of a soldier or Marine and carried wherever it needed to go, whether or not there was a road that went there. Over 60,000 M2 mortars were produced during World War II, entering service in 1943 and remaining in service for decades to come. So the next piece that we're going to take a look at today is an M3 anti-tank gun. Now this weapon was not designed for the Pacific theater. Instead, it was designed to fight against tanks in Europe. However, by the time it entered service in the Battle of Kasserine Pass in Tunisia, it proved to be insufficient against the thick German armor that it encountered. The 37mm round that it fires in several instances was recorded to hit a German tank and bounce harmlessly off the front, earning this weapon the name pea shooter. In the Pacific, this weapon gained greater notoriety. It was more than enough for lightly armored Japanese tanks, and it even developed a reputation as a bunker buster. This was a versatile weapon. It could be fired by a crew of as little as 2. And it had a wide variety of types of munitions. You could fire high explosive, armor piercing, and even canister rounds against the Japanese with this weapon. Unlike our M2 mortar that fired with indirect fire, the M3 anti-tank gun is a direct fire weapon. You can think of it something like a very large rifle. This weapon had a range of about 500 yards, and regrettably for its crew, you had to have a direct line of sight with your target, meaning that after you shot, if you didn't kill your target, the only thing protecting you from it was this thin plate of sheet steel. A well-trained crew of 6 could fire about 25 rounds a minute from this weapon, making it a prolific piece in the Pacific.
Ready, sir? Fire!
So the last light artillery piece that we'll be taking a look at today is the M116 Pack Howitzer. Now before we dive into this particular gun, let's first unpack the name Pack Howitzer. First, the term howitzer. A howitzer refers to the way in which this piece fires. It is not an indirect fire weapon like the mortar, and it is not a direct fire weapon like the anti-tank gun. Instead, it shoots like a howitzer. In mathematical terms, it fires on what's called a parabolic arc. In terms that are easier for the rest of us to understand, this weapon fires the same way a quarterback throws a football to a well-covered receiver. Now the other term, pack, means that this weapon is essentially a giant Lego set. A pack howitzer can be broken down into pieces that are small enough to be carried by teams of men or animals. And this means that despite the large size and wheelbase of this firearm, it could actually be carried over obstacles like ravines, cliffs, and hills, making it easy to surprise the enemy with where your artillery was located. In terms of caliber, the Pack Howitzer is actually the largest of any firearm that we've looked at today. It has a 75mm shell, dwarfing the 37mm anti-tank gun and coming in larger than our 60mm mortar. It fired high explosive rounds on the enemy and was absolutely devastating. A Marine Corps division would have been supported by 36 Pack Howitzers at the beginning of the war. Later, they upgraded from this 75 to a larger version of the same weapon. The Pack Howitzer had a range of over 5 miles, meaning that if you were crewing one of these weapons, you were considerably further back from the front line than the crew of your anti-tank gun or your mortar. Over 5,000 Pack Howitzers were produced during the Pacific War and are still in use today, during ceremonial gun salutes and are used to clear avalanches on mountain passes.
Fire in the hole!
As you can see, there was a wide variety of light artillery pieces that served in the Pacific, and these weapons were capable of making an enormous impact on the battlefield. Hopefully you've learned something new about light artillery and how it helped us win the Pacific War.
All right, so I hope everybody enjoyed that sneak peek of our new virtual outpost program about artillery. While we get the next video ready for you, I wanted to remind everybody that we do multiple topics, not all of them having to do with weapons. For example, I do 3 topics myself. I do the Seabees related one, pictured here. I also do the one entitled Hurry Up and Wait and War Correspondence. And I think we have our next video ready to go.
Hello and welcome to one of the National Museum of the Pacific War's virtual outposts. In this program, we'll be taking a look at the tactics and strategies of the Marine Corps Combat Assault Team, a group of Marines with a group of special skills put together to deal with a special challenge they encountered on Japanese-held islands. Waiting for the Marines when they arrived on the beaches of the islands in the South Pacific was a coordinated Japanese defense. Positions ranging from reinforced concrete pillboxes, steel-doored bunkers, all the way to multiple storage structures that went deep underground, cave networks with hundreds of openings. These were the types of defenses waiting for American Marines. Needless to say, it was more than your average Marine with an M1 rifle and a hand grenade could take care of. That's where the Combat Assault Team comes in. The Combat Assault Team took a wide variety of arms, which on their own would be no match for the Japanese defenses, but through coordination and strategy helped to methodically pick apart Japanese defenses and save American lives. The first role that we're going to take a look at on the Combat Assault Team is that of the team leader, one of the most important. Now, the team leader would have been armed with one of these, a Thompson submachine gun. This firearm is heavy, it's not very accurate, but what it lacks in accuracy and lightness, it makes up for in punch and rate of fire. This weapon at close range, firing a .45 caliber round, would easily deal with anybody coming to deal with the Combat Assault Team. Now, the team lead's main role is not to fire this rifle. Rather, their job is to coordinate all the other individuals who are on the Combat Assault Team. The team leader selects the target, figures out the best route to get there, and then disseminates his attack plan to the rest of the team. After the team lead disseminates the attack plan, he's going to rely on his BAR man to do the next part of the job. The BAR man is armed with a Browning automatic rifle. This weapon, designed in the last days of World War I, was envisioned as a cross between a machine gun and a rifle. This weapon did not perform well in either of those roles, but instead, on the new battlefields of the Second World War, performed excellently at providing covering fire. With a high rate of fire and great range, this weapon was able to easily keep down the heads of Japanese defenders, allowing the slower, more cumbersome parts of the assault team to advance. Essentially, with a BAR, if you could see it, you could shoot it, and if you could shoot it, you could suppress it. With 2 to 3 BAR men covering the way downrange, the slower elements of the Combat Assault Team could begin their advance. One member of that team was the assistant flamethrower operator, armed with one of these model 1897 pump-action shotguns. This firearm was a close-in weapon with an effective range of about 20 yards. The good news is that's about how close they were going to be to the enemy. The role of the shotgun man is to protect the slow members of the assault team from any surprise Japanese attacks that might come out and try to defeat them. Or, in the event that the flamethrower operator goes down, they don their second role, assistant flamethrower operator. They pick up the unit and they complete the mission. Now, there was no member of the combat assault team that the Japanese feared more than the flamethrower operator. This weapon, the M2-2 Flamethrower, entered service in 1944. It is a fearsome weapon on the battlefield. Capable of shooting flames 10 to 30 yards, this weapon struck fear into the hearts of the Japanese. The fear of the Japanese was an essential problem for the flamethrower operator. This weapon was large and bulky and made him an easy shot. For a Japanese soldier in a bunker, the silhouette of this large backpack-mounted unit was unmistakable. Believe you me, every round that a Japanese unit had went towards the flamethrower if they could. To make matters worse for the flamethrower operator, this weapon weighed almost 70 pounds when fully loaded. Walking across a battlefield trying to avoid enemy fire all the time while lugging this enormous weapon on your back was a difficult job. Once they were in close range, the flamethrower operator could open up with this weapon. They only had about 12 seconds of fuel inside of this pack. Nevertheless, that was plenty for whatever the Japanese had inside of a bunker. Believe it or not, the flamethrower did not kill primarily through heat or flame, but by shock and the exclusion of oxygen. For a large bunker complex that went many stories underground, the flames of the flamethrower would eat all of the oxygen inside of the bunker, leaving all of its occupants to suffocate. Truly a fearsome weapon on the battlefield. Now, after the flamethrower had shot into a Japanese bunker, it was time for the last member of the assault team to finish the position. Now, they were armed with this M1 carbine. It's a very small rifle by comparison to everything else carried by the assault team. You might imagine that that would make them inept at their job of finishing the Japanese bunker. But the reason they carry a small rifle like this is because it is not their primary weapon. Instead, they carry a satchel charge. The satchel charge is this bag, a 22-pound TNT charge, which once thrown into a burning Japanese bunker marked the end of its ability to contest the battlefield. When a charge of this size goes off inside of a reinforced building like those bunkers, the charge has nowhere to go but through the occupants of the bunker. It is safe to say that when it has done its work, there is nobody left alive inside of that position.
Fire in the hole! Fire in the hole!
Looking at each of the weapons on this table, we can see that on their own, they would be no match for the Japanese position. But through the coordination of the team leader, under the cover of the BAR man, with the protection of the shotgun operator, and working together, the flamethrower and the satchel charge are able to undo a complex Japanese position. Now, the combat assault team was able to reduce American casualties on the battlefield. Nevertheless, casualties were still high. Many Marines fell on battlefields of the Pacific. Thank you for tuning in to our virtual outpost program on the combat assault team. You can find other virtual outpost programs on our website, or on our events page, you can find opportunities to see outpost programs like these in person here at the National Museum of the Pacific War in Fredericksburg, Texas.
All right, now is time for our Q&A. So if our at-home audience has any questions, if you could please put them into the chat box. We have a couple of minutes to ask some questions of our in-house guest here, Aaron. I have one that I'm going to go ahead and kick us off with. Sure. So how do you see the virtual outpost programs being utilized in the future?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. It's kind of what drove us to create the virtual outposts. So we know that a lot of this content we want to get out to as many people as we can. We know it's hard for people to come and visit. So it is good for people to see it online, but it's also in schools, potentially something that could be very useful. We know our teachers have maybe 45 minutes to an hour to teach a lesson on the Pacific War. They might just get 2 days. A lot of this content is going to be pretty quickly covered. They don't have time to dive in. So we figure maybe if we put some discussion questions on the end of these programs, these might be some good extra credit, some good essay question, homework style assignments, help kids kind of delve into this history a little bit more.
All right. I have another question, and then there's one that's come through on the chat. So my other question was, how do you select the topics?
Yeah, that's a complicated one. So, when I arrived, we had our 4 topics. Now we are up to 12, and we actually retired 2 last year. So we've done 16 Outpost topics. And really the driving factor has been our education outreach collection, where we keep a lot of the artifacts that we use for these programs. Of course, there's a lot of things that we'd like to cover and talk about that we don't actually have any physical things for people to touch and hold. And if we don't have those things, it's just us kind of talking at you. It's not so different than a lot of the other experiences you can get in the gallery. So artifacts, that's what it is. So if you have some World War II stuff that's that we don't have, let us know.
Yes. We have a question that's come through, and I don't know the answer. I'm not sure if the answer is really known, but do we know how many flamethrower operators were killed during World War II in the Pacific?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's a question that, as far as I know, there is no true answer to. One of the things about the Pacific War is it's vast. There's a lot of people. Being a flamethrower operator wasn't necessarily something that that was like your duty title. It was something that they kind of said, you, flamethrower, let's go. You've been trained. So a lot of individuals would have fallen with that. I know that their lifespans were incredibly short once they were wearing that unit. They're very recognizable on the battlefield. I want to say on Iwo Jima, it was something like 4 minutes from the time they got that flamethrower on until the time that they were killed on average. So certainly a very high number.
Okay, we have another question. This is a great question. How does someone interested in participating in the reenactments go about joining your group?
I love that question because it helps me. So if you're interested in joining Company K, which is the group that does our reenactment programs, number one thing you got to do is go to our website. So up on the top bar, there's a section that says Learn. Under that, there's one that says Living History. You're going to go all the way down to the bottom of that page, and there's a section about joining Company K. We're required because of some, there's my boss putting the link right in there, right? She's good. But we are required by law to do a background check on you so that we can hand you a firearm. But after that's done, it's a pretty quick training session. Great thing about our program, you come out, we provide everything for you. You can show up just with yourself. We give you uniform, firearm, ammunition. We even feed you a good lunch. So definitely sign up, get an opportunity to come out and join us.
Yes, when I first got here and I started doing the Outpost presentations myself, one of the most enjoyable things was getting to work with the guests coming in and letting them actually touch the artifacts. A lot of places you're not able to do that. So I have a real quick story for you. This one was from when I was doing the war correspondence presentation at a high school. And my favorite thing to do when we open up to let everybody come down to look and look at the artifacts and pick them up is to tell the kids to smell the artifacts, which they think is very funny. They're like, what do you mean smell the artifacts? Like, I'm like, no, it's okay. You can pick it up and you can smell it. And of course they do, because now they're curious. So they pick up the artifact and they smell it and they go, oh, what is that smell? And I'm like, history. And then they roll their eyes at me, but they have had the opportunity to engage with our World War II artifacts, and not everybody gets that. So it's my way of kind of enticing them to engage with the material. That said, I actually have a piece here. Aaron, would you like to hold up the piece to model? Because this one is very popular with the war correspondence presentation that we do. My Star Wars fans out there might recognize it. What does it look like?
Skywalker's lightsaber.
Yes, it looks like a lightsaber. But it's actually part of a camera kit from World War II, and it's part of the kit that I take out to do this presentation with. And sure enough, anytime I have it out for kids to see or adults to see, somebody will come up and say, "What is that? What I think it is?" Yes, it is. I see we have another question that's come in. Was every member of the combat team cross-trained on every weapon?
Yeah, so that's what you would strive for as a leader in a unit. So one of the things about combat assault teams, they have a pretty high attrition rate. These guys are generally your command is going to select a position that's holding everybody up, and they're going to shelter while the assault team actually moves forward and deals with it. So they're in harm's way a lot. So you hope that everybody gets trained, but you're going to have a lot of green guys on the team and new replacements too.
All right, we have another question. Who carried the ammo and how much did it weigh?
Weighed a lot. So
Heavy.
it varies weapon to weapon. So I know when I'm in a program, I'll usually carry an M1 Garand, which isn't exactly what we talked about here, but I carry about 50 rounds of ammo. It has a good amount of weight to it, a few pounds, and you load it in with everything else that you're carrying. But so they would have received what they would have called a combat load before each day of combat when they could get back to where they had the ammo. And depending on the weapon, so like a high rate of fire weapon like a BAR, there were usually a couple of riflemen that would have accompanied the BAR man with bandoliers filled with extra ammo, and that would have been quite heavy. You're talking a couple hundred rounds a person, maybe 20 or 30 pounds of ammo, in addition to their 10-pound rifle, their kit, their canteen, their food, their bag, and everything else they're carrying into the battle.
One of the other presentations we do is called Kid Pack, and our coworker Brian specializes in this one, and it's hilarious because he brings a kid down and he dresses them up like a Marine, and very slowly you see them get more and more weighted down with all of the gear that the guys would have worn. Do you have like a favorite memory or a story from one of the many outposts that you have done?
Yeah, I mean, so one of my favorites is when we get to do one of my other programs. So I do 3 outposts here. So I do the 2 that you've seen, and then our other one is called In the Service of the Emperor, and we actually talk about what it was that the life would be like for a member of the Japanese military. And we have a lot of artifacts of theirs, and one of the things that we have is a good luck flag with names on it. And I know that it's always really special to see people pick up that flag and ask about it. And as they're holding it and you explain to them what all those names are on it, what that flag meant to a Japanese soldier, you see them make that connection in a way that they just don't do other places. It's different than reading it. You're holding it, you're touching it. And that's really, really, it's great to see. Mm-hmm. It shows that what we're doing is making an impact.
Right. Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions, because I'm not seeing any in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and thank everybody for attending today. Don't forget to sign up for our next webinar entitled Blackboards and Bomb Shelters, Insights from the Author. Our guest speaker will be James Bevel, the author. And thank you so much for joining us today.